What did you say?
I'll take the 1 minute.
1 minute before 10?
Or 1 minute.
1 minute before.
It's already 1 minute before
No,
10.
or 1 minute before 15.
1 minute before 15.
Okay, you got it.
I'll just take some chalk.
I'll do the
Sorry,
the
not
razor.
available.
I'll do
Okay.
the razor. See,
Whoa, ho, 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 ho.
it's sharp.
Well, you got chalk.
Bro,
Down
back
to
in the
nitty
day.
gritty here, man.
I got good eyesight.
I guess we're not writing those
Thank you.
chalkboards.
Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Had a lot of good speeches today, huh? Talked about legislation, talked about quilting, talked about insurance fraud, talked about cancer. Still got me going on that cancer, man. Talked about a lot of different subjects. I have a question. You mentioned jingles, how we are forced to remember things against our own will. How would you like to never be subdued by a jingle again? How would you like, it was you, I believe, someone said, knowing what we hear and it was John, not believing everything that we hear. He's talking about the HB 4050 bill. How would you like to know that you know what you're hearing? More than just not believing what you hear, how would you like to know that you know what you're hearing? How would you like to not be fooled by secret codes anymore? I know I sound like a weak infomercial, but there's actually a technique, there's actually knowledge out there that can help you to think more clearly, can help you to process more deeply, help you to see things the way they really are, as opposed to the fog and the pretense that's sometimes put up there by the people that are advertising, that are spending thousands of dollars, politicians and religious folk and the like. That knowledge is logic, philosophy. Today we're going to talk real briefly about logic and philosophy. We're going to talk about some fallacies of logic, some errors that people make in their reasoning, in their arguments, in their judgment. And then I'll talk about a few reasons why you ought to make logic a high pursuit in your life, why you ought to make this a subject that you at least get a grasp on, if not master. It will help your life, it will improve your life exponentially. Let's have some definitions first, and I wanted to, dang that, I'm going around the board. All right. Logic is the set of rules that governs correct reasoning and thinking in accordance with verifiable, predetermined sets of rules of engagement. In other words, logic says we have presuppositions that we agree on. Rules that we say, we're going to start here with something that's called first principle. We're going to start here from our argument. And then we're going to argue according to set rules of understanding and reason. That's logic. It comes from the Greek word
Logos.
you got it, logos, which among 30 different things that it means a whole bunch, because the original Greek word is very rich and very complex, but it means word, reason, study, order. It means a whole bunch of things. When you hear about gynecology, archaeology, these words all have at the base, or at the end, logos, the study, the reason, the order, the understanding. So that's logic. Philosophy is the love of wisdom, from the Greek word phileo, meaning brotherly love, and again from the Greek word sophos, meaning wisdom, the love of wisdom. But what is wisdom? Wisdom is having the desire to accumulate knowledge of right and wrong, the difference between the two, and then having the will to operate according to that knowledge. Some people have simplified it to say that wisdom means skillful living. So philosophy is the love of wisdom. There are different branches of philosophy. One such branch is metaphysics. Metaphysics is the study of reality. What is real? Is this table real? Am I really standing here? Is that chair real? Is she really sitting in space and time right there? That's a question of metaphysics. There's aesthetics. Aesthetics is the study of beauty, of art. What is beautiful? Why is a sunset beautiful? Why is music beautiful? That's aesthetics. Axiology, if I don't write, I feel like I'm not teaching. Axiology is a study of values, value judgments. Why does something have value? Why does it have worth? Is there a difference between a high value and a low value? That's axiology. There's ethics, the study of morality. What is right and wrong? How do you know if there's right and wrong? Is it better to be right than to be wrong? Is good better than evil? Is there ever really even a difference? That's ethics. Then there's rational discourse. Rational discourse means that it's very similar to logic, whereas we agree to talk to each other in a certain pre-described manner, whereas we actually obey certain rules and regulations of our talking. We're reasonable, we're logical, we're rational. That's reasonable or reasoned discourse. Logic is important because without logic, you often find yourself drifting off into the space of illogical, unintelligent, unproductive clatter. Logic helps to clear all of that up. And if you study it and get a grasp on it, it helps you in your everyday interactions. Let's do a little history. The original philosophers, or wise men, were called sophos. Sophos is a Greek word for wise men, or sages, or folks who are recognized in their culture as being full of wisdom, being full of understanding. We will call them sages, or Buddha was a sophos. Confucius was a sophos. After the sophos, there were the sophios. The sophios were different from the sophos in that the sophios charged students to learn from them, whereas the sophos gathered disciples and gathered followers after themselves. This was important, the fact that they charged people, because these folks, in their time around 400 BC, around 800 BC, you had to be of the elite. You had to be rich. You had to be someone who had power or culture to even come up under the teaching or the tutelage of the sophos. Whereas the sophios charged students. So if you had the money to pay, you could actually come up under their teaching and learn from them. That was a very important deviation, because the most famous of all sophios was Socrates. You got it.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about him momentarily. Socrates. Socrates was born 470 BC, died 399 BC. He was a fantastic man, a philosopher. He was an archetype, a philosophical archetype. That is to say, he embodied such a dramatic shift, such a dramatic paradigm shift in his own time, that he was an archetype. He was a prime example of his particular brand of doctrine or teaching. Socrates brought to us many ideas. One of them was the beginning of wisdom is a definition of terms. Linda talked about my blessed life. Well, that's slightly convincing and slightly intriguing, except what does blessed mean? Is my life blessed? Well, I don't really know unless I know what blessed means. And what does blessed mean to you? What does it mean to me? The sophios were the ones that said truth is relative. Relativism is relative depending upon who you're talking to and the circumstance they find themselves in. But Socrates said the beginning of wisdom is a definition of terms. He said most folks don't even know what they're talking about. So he always demanded that folks would define their terms. He was so irritating about this that folks hated him. Either they loved him or they hated him, because he was very, very deliberate about his asking for definitions and clarifying and being concise and being precise in the things he talked about. Something else Socrates did was the Socratic dialectic, or sometimes it's called the Socratic method. This was a style of arguing and dialoguing where he would ask probing questions and give answers. He wasn't a lecturer. He didn't declare, but he asked probing questions, because Socrates believed that the intelligence and the answers that we have for the questions we have are inside of us. All one has to do is ask the right questions to bring that information out. Again, a very powerful, very effective method of argumentation and dialogue that Socrates engaged in. A fallacy, Plato was one of Socrates' students. Plato wrote a book of fallacies. A fallacy is an error or flaw in arguing. To best illustrate what a fallacy is, I took the liberty of printing out a few illustrations, and I'll show them to you very briefly. As you look at this illustration, as I looked at it, one thing came to my mind. When I showed Ben, I was thinking about it too. What came to my mind when I saw this was, it makes sense, but something's not quite right. Yes, but no. I can see this, but something doesn't quite fit. And I've got copies of all of these if you'd like to see them. These are fallacies. They are errors. They are flaws in logic. They seem like they should make sense, but something's not quite fitting together. Like, how did they do this anyway? It's actually a camera trick. It doesn't exist. But that's what a fallacy is. There are hundreds and hundreds of fallacies. I want to talk about just a few that you will encounter every day to equip you, to make you more able to identify them and refute them in everyday life. Here's a popular one. A red herring. You hear this all the time from politicians. So, politician so-and-so, what's your view on abortion in America today? Well, he says, our doctors are the finest doctors in America. And not only that, we have the finest schools turning out the finest doctors. You won't go anywhere in this great country, or in this world for that matter, and find better doctors than the ones in America. What did he just do?
Circumvented the question.
He circumvented. He went all the way around it, didn't he? He actually avoided it altogether with a red herring. A red herring is avoiding the question being asked by going to an irrelevant topic. You avoided the question entirely. Politicians do it. Your friends do it. It's a red herring. Don't be fooled by that. Another one, ad populum. Ad is Latin for against or toward. So ad populum is toward the popular, toward the popularity. See? It means going with the popular, what's popular at that moment, the crowd, and thereby using that crowd or popular thing to boost your own argument, to say, I must be right because everybody else likes it. Here's a good example. This book has been on the New York Times bestsellers list for 3 weeks in a row. So, does that make this book a great book because it's been on some list? How about this one? #1 movie in America for 4 weeks running. So what? By going with what's popular, by saying a vast majority of people are into this thing, you're thereby trying to say that what I'm selling or what I'm presenting must be right. But that's fallacious. That by itself does not guarantee that what you're selling or what you have or what you're telling is in fact even worth listening to, let alone accurate. That's ad populum. Another good one is begging the question. Begging the question is a circular argument. Here's a good example. In paleoanthropology, they have a rule that says in a certain strata, these are layers of rock. Different types of layers are supposed to represent different geological ages. The further down you go, the older the rock is supposed to be. If this is 6 million years old, and I find a bone sticking out of this rock right here, it is reasonable for me to say, according to paleoanthropology, that this bone is 6 million years old. So you ask the scientist, how old is this bone? Well, we found it in this strata, so it must be 6 million years old. Well, you ask, how do you know the strata is 6 million years old? Well, because we found the bone in it. Well, how do you know the bone is, and you see it's a circle. There's another argument that I wasn't going to use, but I'm going to use because it illustrates my point. I believe the Bible, I'm a Christian, but when we use this argument to prove the Bible, we're shooting ourselves in the foot because it's begging a question. How do you know the Bible is true? Because the Bible says it's true. Well, that's a circle, that's begging the question because you haven't proved it's true, you've only went back, you started here and went right back to here. You haven't proved it. We beg the question all the time. We don't give adequate evidence. We don't really prove things. We only give weak suppositions that don't prove what we were trying to say to begin with. Wow. That's begging the question. All right. The straw man is an oversimplification. In other words, I take a complex argument like cancer, and I say, you know what? That's not true. Everybody knows cancer is just a bunch of bumps on your face. I'm taking a complex issue, and I'm oversimplifying it. That's a straw man. A straw man is a man made of straw that's weak. It barely holds up at all, and you can knock a straw man right down. And that's what we do when we oversimplify an argument. What are some ways that we can use logic in everyday life to make our lives better? Number one, logic, recognizing fallacies, thinking clearly, using deduction and reasoning, helps us to think clear. When we think clear, we make better decisions. You talk about going to buy a car, getting married, listening to advice from your friends. When you use logic and reason, you think more clearly. You make better decisions. Your life is better. Greater discernment will help you with your civic duty. Leslie gave a good argument for standing up in our community and speaking out, and so did John, and making a difference. When you use logic and reason and deduction, you're able to be a better civil servant. You're able to better fulfill your responsibility to your own community and to the democratic government because you're able to think more clearly about the arguments, about the issues, about the platforms that are presented to you. You hear what's really being said and not the words that are presented to you. Finally, knowing what you know and why you know it makes your life more fulfilling. It's one thing for me to say, I believe in marriage, I believe in pro-life, I believe in the God of the Bible. It's another thing to know why you know what you know and to be able to give ample, adequate, sufficient evidence for that. When you're able to do that, your life is more fulfilling. You're able to bring people along with you into what you believe to be true. And that's important. Logic, reasoning, philosophy helps you do that. You don't have to be a master of it. None of us can master it all. But at least get your hands on it. Get into a little bit of it. It will vastly improve your life. Thank you. That was all.